What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, powered by Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Hope you had a great weekend. Great Father's Day. Little Father's Day gift, perhaps, for the Canes, a crystal ball for a big offensive lineman to the U. We will talk about that. We also have a very comprehensive, long conversation. Now that the team's in order, we talked to Luke Chaney of Inside the U, of Owls 247, talking about Miami Hurricanes basketball. We know what the team is, finally. We know who's leaving, we know who's coming in, and we break down what this team will look like in 2024, 2025. Luke is awesome. Go in-depth. You will not get that kind of in-depth conversation anywhere, I promise. So we'll break down hoops. First, want to talk about my friends at Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life. You're not paying fees out of pocket. If you don't get paid, they don't get paid. Anijar and Levine. All right, Pete, get in here. We're going to talk about the latest crystal ball to the Miami Hurricanes. That is Demetrius Campbell out of Orlando. Basketball player, originally from Maine. We've talked about the film before. I know you're going to pull up the huddle here, but interesting crystal ball. It matches my information, which is that Miami would take this player. Mirabal really likes his upside. He visited a couple weeks ago, 6'6", 300. Interesting frame. He's got a very strong upper body, or at least wide upper body. His legs are pretty skinny, very athletic. I think he will carry the weight. He does need a lot of time in the weight room, though, just to, get in football shape as opposed to basketball shape, where he was a player in Maine. I believe he played with Cooper Flagg up there in Maine. Your boy, Pete, his brother played for Notre Dame or signed with Notre Dame, ends up at Howard, comes from a basketball family. So basketball player, switched to football, lower level competition, as you can see from the highlights. But it's interesting. Basketball player, you think the pass blocking be ahead of the run blocking, but I think the run blocking is probably ahead of the pass blocking from what I saw at camp and from what we're seeing on these clips.
Yeah, the level of competition is very tough to gauge, obviously, D, but the footwork looks really, really good in run blocking. You see him drive, through the blocks. And yes, he does look a little top heavy right now, but as with that basketball background, you'd expect his lower half to fill out over time. That clip right there, where he drives the guy through to the fences is very impressive. We talked about that last time, but looks very, very nimble, man. Looks very, very nimble for a player, a recruit that size.
Yeah, I think the camps, you saw the athleticism, but the flashes, but the pass blocking wasn't there yet. And again, you see the highlights. He's not pass blocking a ton. I don't think that's what he was asked to do in his offense. Again, small school, Orlando, and coming from Maine as a basketball player. So that's a work in progress, but you can't coach the size. You can't coach the athleticism. And really, you can't coach the will to run block. And that natural kind of physicality and pop, that doesn't always translate with basketball players. You see that already. So put, some good weight on this guy. That upper body will get stronger as you put weight on. The lower body, I think, is going to stay relatively skinny, but you can get stronger. Certainly, you were doing that in basketball, focusing on getting that heavier. So he will, with 2 years, I think, potentially be somebody that can help you. I don't think he's a one-year project. I think Jaden Wilkerson, the other tackle Miami's looking at from Orlando, with a basketball player, he might be closer than Campbell. But I think this is like more a 2-year project. He's rated as a low 3-star. I think that's fair given the amount of projection that you need with him. But these are the guys you see get to the NFL in their 4th, 5th year of college. So interesting guy, a guy Mirabal likes. This is not a plan B take. Mirabal wants this guy, identified him early, and they would love to take his commitment if that crystal ball turns out to be accurate.
Something I've had scouts tell me about these bigger offensive linemen is like they watch to see how they get up from the ground when the play is over. And there's just some clips here where he's kind of hopping over guys after he pancakes them, and just little things like that. Again, long ways to go in terms of his power, his technique, but all those things, I think, once it's coached out of him, should really be, a high ceiling with this kid.
Yeah, look, Mirabal likes these kind of guys. If you look at his offensive line in Oregon, that was one of the best in the country. Yes, he had the Penei Sewells, but he didn't have 5 Penei Sewells. He had guys that kind of fit this profile. This is how he gets down. You want to add some more highly rated guys. Certainly SJ from Las Vegas. Some of the interior linemen Miami's been involved with fit the bill. Tackle, I think, is going to be more of these kind of guys. And Campbell is one that we've identified and that Mirabal wants and would love to get a commitment from. So we will monitor that closely. You will hear everything first on Canes Insight. Now switching gears from a hoop player turned football player back to hoops full-time. That is the Miami Hurricanes basketball program. We talk about it with Luke Chaney of Inside the UNL's 247, who follows Canes basketball as close as anybody. Awesome conversation. Me, Pete, and him went for about an hour, Pete, really breaking down every single prediction or every single player, what the projections of these players, their different roles, the battles that are going to take place. A lot of fun with Luke. We put some highlights in there. So really encourage you to check it out. And if you want to get your Canes basketball gear early so you can play in your summer leagues and get your summer runs in, caneswear.com or the store in Davie. They got basketball jerseys, basketball shirts, basketball shorts, all you need for your pickup games, for your watch parties, and for attending the games. Get ahead of it. You don't have to wait till November to get your Canes basketball gear. You can do it now at caneswear.com. Get ready for summer. That's when you're going to wear this gear anyways, right? For your pickup games. Caneswear.com and Caneswear in Davie. So with that, let's talk to Luke.
Joining us now on the Canes Insight Daily Podcast is Luke Chaney of 247 Sports. Does a great job over there, covering everything Hurricanes related, but specifically basketball team, which is what we're going to be talking about with him today. We had you on, Luke, a couple months back, and there were a lot of things in limbo at that time, right? And Miami was starting to make moves in the portal, but a lot has happened since then. So excited to dive into all of this with you today. Just getting right into the portal, right? You're someone who talks to people inside the program. We knew that they wanted to be very active and aggressive. They had to be, because there was a lot of departures, Norchad Omier probably being the most significant of the bunch there. But how does the staff feel they kind of did overall after what had to have been a pretty stressful couple months for them?
Yeah, I believe that. First off, just thank you so much for having me, man. I think the staff really did a very excellent job at kind of filling every major need they had coming into this offseason, because there were some pretty large holes in this team, even before all the departures of Wooga and Norchad and everything. But I feel like they did a really good job of identifying what went wrong, not only in that 10-game losing streak last year, but throughout the entirety of the season, and doing a good job of, correcting what went wrong. I mean, bringing in height and size, and, Lynn Kidd and Brandon Johnson and Kyrie Hughes, and we'll talk about all the guys, but they brought in good, effective size, brought in a lot of depth. They actually used all 13 scholarship spots, which is something that Miami fans have been really, really harping on the past couple of years, because they haven't. I think last year they used only 11. And they brought in multiple bucket getters, right? Recruiting, Hassan Swartz, Jaleel Bethea. Both of those guys are players who can create shots on their own and get buckets. And then you bring in a very veteran scorer like Jalen Blackman, who's probably my favorite portal addition throughout this entire offseason. They did a really good job of, filling those two needs and just bringing in quality depth to the point where they're not – obviously, they don't want injuries to happen, but it's not of a dire situation won't happen again. Let's say if a Nigel Pack goes down, or a Jalen Blackman goes down, or a Lynn Kidd goes down. They have quality players to fill in and kind of, buffer those losses if they were to happen.
One thing that was interesting to me, just comparing last year to this year, really the last couple of years to this year, is we are now a big team, right? And I heard Coach L say that he expects Cleveland to start at small forward, which would mean Brandon Johnson at power forward, Lynn Kidd as your true center. That's bigger than some NBA teams, a lot of NBA teams in the front court. What do you think this team's going to look like just from a size and style of play standpoint, if that is indeed the starting front court?
Yeah, I expect that to be the starting front court. I mean, we'll see, obviously, when the season gets rolling. But that was – I don't know if I mentioned this last time I was on the show, but that was the message to Matt in that end of season meeting, which is, I think, kind of the reason why he came back and didn't elect to, enter the portal. Things with Miami and Cleveland throughout last season, it's not a secret. They weren't great. But one of the reasons why Miami pitched him to return is because they're not going to have him play the 4 anymore. Or they're not going to have him play mostly the 4 anymore. They're going to use him as the 3. They're going to use him as the 2 I expect him to play mostly small forward, which is his natural position. It's where he excelled at Florida State. And just looking at the starting lineup, I think we can all pencil in Lynn Kidd, obviously, to be the starting five. It would make a ton of sense for spacing purposes to have Brandon Johnson be your starting four. And I think Cleveland is a shoo-in to start. So, I mean, you're just rolling into next year with a lot of size 3 through 5. I mean, Cleveland's 6'7". Johnson's 6'8", but he's stocky. He can play above his height. And then Kidd is obviously a very lengthy 6'10", 6'11". So you have very playable size, and that's something that you didn't have last year as much in the front court, where you're rolling out a 3 through 5 of 6'4" to 6'5", Wooga, 6'7", Matt, 6'6", Norchad. So you have a lot of playable size, and I think that's really going to help Miami when they're playing against these much taller teams.
Luke, without a doubt, the loss of Norchad, was something that hurt. Obviously, his success the last couple of years, the energy he played with, the motor, all that. I mean, did you kind of get any insight to, not to get too into the details of it, but I mean, what was the feeling amongst the people inside there when he officially did? Because even when he initially entered the portal, I think maybe there's still a little bit of hope that he would end up staying, but obviously ended up going to Baylor. So
yeah, I think with Norchad, I have to give Miami staff a lot of credit for how they just handled this entire offseason in regards to the front court and especially with Norchad, because that was, one of the biggest, I guess we'll say, decisions of this offseason. What was Norchad going to do? I think we all kind of expected him to declare and, test the waters to some degree, but was he going to stay at Miami or was he going to enter the portal? The feeling for a while, right, was that Norchad was going to stay at Miami. That was the initial feeling. That was the initial vibe that I was getting. At one point, I was told that, hey, Norchad is likely going to return to Miami. Obviously, that's not what happened. Some things behind the scenes, I'm not going to get into it super much, but it goes to Baylor, right? What I like most about what Miami did is that they didn't do what they did last year. They didn't wait on the decisions of Zay and Jordan, and then they're left, early May, kind of, scrambling around trying to make
empty-handed. Yeah, you have less options. The portal options dry up at that point. You can't do work late. These guys, when they enter the portal these days, they have an idea of where they're headed.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's so much back channeling that goes on, and this obviously the same for football. But it's like in a way, I'm not going to go on a huge tangent here, but Miami got pretty lucky in that 22 offseason because Nigel and Norchad went to Miami relatively late in the portal process. I think they both committed in early May. You don't see that all the time. So Miami was in a position last year where they were left scrambling. They were, their plan kind of faltered quite a bit. Whereas this year, right, they went ahead, got Lynn Kidd early in the portal process, got Brandon Johnson early in the portal process, right? So they have their starting front court figured out even before Norchad was to make his decision, right? So now you're left in a spot where, hey, if Norchad returns, it might be a little bit of a cluster, but, that's a good problem to figure out. Norchad ended up leaving. It sucks. He's an amazing player, and he's going to do great things at Baylor. But they were in a good spot because they came into this offseason prepared with a plan. And, now they have a starting front court that I think will, compete with hopefully some of the best in the ACC.
So, look, I want to go through all these additions one by one because it's really a whole new team. It's kind of like meet the new Canes based on our conversation last time where we wrapped up last season. Aside from Nigel Pack, Cleveland, a couple other guys, Jabed. I mean, really, there's the team is new. So starting at the top, you mentioned this is your favorite guy in the portal class. I want to start with him because me and Pete have had a lot of discussions off air about it. That's Jalen Blackman, the guard from Stetson, 21 points per game. Amazing shooter, 38% from three, 90% from the line, which is a big thing for me is the free throw percentage and how that translates. Me and Pete couldn't figure this kid out. Does he have the twitch to really get in the paint against ACC teams? Is he going to be more of a spot-up shooter? Is he going to get his shot against ACC defenses? Connecticut was kind of a tough way to evaluate them because they're the best team in the country and all eyes were on him. How do you see Jalen Blackman's game translating to the ACC level? What's he going to do on the court?
Yeah, so I think with Jalen, I mean, you see in his, in the highlights and his Stetson film, he's shown the ability to score at all three levels. Most comfortable behind the 3-point line, but he can get to the basket, very crafty around the rim, good at finishing through contact and good at initiating contact, which is something that you really want to see. Can also get into his mid-range as well, but the strength of his game is definitely his three-pointers, really good off the catch, can shoot off the move, coming off of pin downs and flares and whatnot. A high volume 3-point shooter. I mean, I think he shot, I want to say like 7 to 7.5 attempts last year from beyond the arc, which, I mean, for the 38% of threes that he made, that's very good efficiency at a very high volume clip. And yeah, I mean, one thing that I really appreciate about his offensive game and his scoring ability is that he plays at his own pace. He's very comfortable playing at different speeds, going from slow to fast and fast to slow. I like how he accelerates and decelerates. He can really get into that 10 to 15 foot range and, pass or shoot from there. Not something that I wish he was a little bit more proven with is his passing ability. He's good in the pick and roll, makes good reads. He's a good assist rate. But he's not a true number one point guard kind of guy. I think that's fine. Like Miami's excelled in the past where they didn't have a true point guard. I mean, they didn't have a point guard during the Final Four run, and look what happened. But that's something I want to see with Jalen Blackman, especially early on in the non-conference schedule, just him getting some of those reps at the one, playing on as a ball handler on ball screens and whatnot. But yeah, I think he's a terrific scorer. I think he's probably going to start, I would say, at least early on in the season. I think he's probably going to get the starting nod over, a guy like Jaleel Bethea. And we've seen with Larinaga teams in the past that his really highly talented freshmen don't start right away. I think that's what we might end up seeing this year. I think Blackman's a terrific player, terrific scorer, makes big-time plays in big-time games. Thought he played okay against UConn, all things considered, in that tournament game. I was ecstatic when Miami got him because I think he's going to be a really fun player to cover. And he definitely fills that bucket-getting need that Miami had because they really didn't have a whole lot of players last year who could score on their own. And Blackman can do just that. I'm very happy with, this addition.
Before I let Pete get into the next player, his next point, I wanted to jump on something you said because this was one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Pete and I had a very long discussion about this off air. The guard that's going to be left out here, I think you agree, Blackman, Bethea, and Pack all starting, at least if the front court is intact. So I went back and looked. Bethea, a 99 ranking on 247 at point guard, top 10 player in the nation. I went back and looked at guys with that profile, and I had to go all the way back to Frank Jackson, if you remember him at Duke, almost 10 years ago, to find a guy who didn't start pretty much the whole season. I mean, some of these guys, maybe started 26 out of 29 games, but they were the starter, right? Last year, Collier, USC, DeJuan Wagner, Kentucky. I mean, these are the guys in the weight class we're talking about. It's hard to find guys with Bethea's profile that don't start. So how do you see that playing out? Do you have any information on how something was pitched to him in recruiting? Because it'd be weird for Miami of all programs to be the one that sits a player of this caliber.
It would, but the only thing with Bethea that I'll mention, terrific player, terrific scorer, terrific shooter, athletic as hell. I think body-wise, he's a little underdeveloped in his frame. I mean, if you see some of those clips in the McDonald's All-American game, he has a thinner frame than I think you would like from someone like him. So I think like the adjustment to college basketball, there may be some rough spots during non-conference play, which is why I could see them playing him off the bench to start things off, still getting 25 minutes a game, but just kind of playing him in that 6-man role. With Lonnie Walker, did he come off the bench initially? Because I know he picked up as the season went along, but did he come off the bench initially during his college career?
He was hurt. He was hurt, if I remember correctly. He had
a knee injury.
Okay. So he missed the first part of the year.
then that changes things. Then yeah, I mean, it's just like if you start Bethea, then who are you
But
now?
Lonnie was a completely different athlete. Also,
He
Lonnie
was.
was ready for the NBA body wise. Well, not really, but I mean, he obviously turned out to be a guy who was a NBA level athlete plus athlete, right? So I think that's the only distinction for sure.
For sure. It's like, but like with the whole Bethea starting thing, it's like, who are you now going to bring off the bench, right? Because do you think, or I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in general, like, do we think that Bethea has more of a case to start over a Jalen Blackman, who 21 points a game, the 10th leading scorer in the country last year on a tournament team? That's I mean, listen, I mean, you could bring him off the bench for use him as like a hyper 6-man type player, but it's a good problem to have, right? It's a good problem to have. I'm pretty confident in that front court. I think we all know Pat's going to start. It's probably going to come down to Bethea and Blackman. I think regardless, Miami's going to play all of them 25 plus minutes per game. They're all going to get run. They're all going to get their on-ball reps. So I think it's going to work out. It's going to work itself out. I could see them, tooling some things around early on in the season, but that's definitely lineup wise. I think that's the biggest storyline to watch out for is, who emerges as that 2 guard. Is it going to be Bethea? Is it going to be Blackman? Is Austin Swartz going to throw his name and going to throw his hat in the race? Because he's someone that can get buckets. So we'll see, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
Brandon Johnson from ECU, a guy that I'm very excited about. Another, really good 3-point shooter, has some range at his size, 6'8", right? And again, productive player at, the high Division I level. Mm-hmm. So I mean, to me, that's you're not replacing Norchad Omier with players that are like him, which we've already had that discussion. But I think the mix of them together, right? The sum of all their parts could be greater than one, right? So with Brandon Johnson in particular, Luke, what do they feel they're adding to the roster with him?
Great spot up guy. I mean, like, he's terrific floor spacer, and is something that really impressed me when I went back and watched some of the stuff was that he could shoot from deep. Like, I think he made something like 17 threes last year from beyond 25 feet. Like, his range steps back from multiple feet from behind the 3-point line. Very confident shooter, very comfortable shooter, very smooth mechanics. He's not someone's going to question the shot. He can shoot from the corner, above the break, elbow, wing. I mean, he can shoot from pretty much anywhere on the floor. And a smooth post-up game as well. He's someone that's 6'8", so you could say he's a little undersized height-wise, but I wouldn't say he's stocky, but he does have a good some good weight on his body, right? Good frame. He's very technical around the basket. He has good footwork. Can also attack closeouts pretty effectively, which is obviously a good skill to have. Not really a super overly flashy back, but he's not going to hit you with a tween cross hezzy into a fadeaway 22-foot pull-up or anything. But I mean, he can definitely attack players who close out a little bit too recklessly on the 3-point line. But yeah, I love Brandon Johnson a lot. Very good shooter, and he's going to definitely serve a purpose. I think, last year Miami lived and died by the 3-point shot. And I think especially towards the end of the season when they went on that 10-game losing streak, 3-point shooting is something that was very inconsistent at some times. With Johnson, he's going to provide just a consistent force and consistent volume as well from behind the 3-point line, because I feel like we always look at like when we evaluate, how good a shooter is, we oftentimes just look at the percent. But with Johnson, you're getting good efficiency, but I think more importantly, you're also getting very good and very effective volume as well.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I really like about him, which we talked about right in the beginning there, is his ability to score in the post. I think, especially when Norchad got in foul trouble last year, right? The year before, Jordan Miller was eating in the post. He was eating on that block with his spin, his little half turnaround, the finishes around the rim that he had. I don't think he has that same post-up game with the creativity and craftiness around the rim, but we missed that last year, I believe, in a major way. And I think he'll be able to get some mismatches when he's playing with a 7-footer out there as well. So, yeah.
And one thing I really want to add quickly about, Johnson in the front court in general is that I think you can have a lot of fun offensively running the offense, kind of like how you did in that 21-22 season with Jordan Miller and Sam Wardenberg, in the sense that one of my favorite actions from that season was when Miami went with like a double high ball screen and you popped out Sam Wardenberg and then rolled Jordan Miller to the basket, kind of playing off that high-low action. Well, with Johnson and Kidd, you have someone who can really effectively roll to the basket in Lynn Kidd. Then you have someone in Brandon Johnson who could not only pop behind the three-point line, but could pop 5 feet behind the three-point line. So I think that gives you a lot of offensive flexibility that Miami really hasn't had the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Lynn Kidd now that we're on to this subject, because to me, he's the most interesting guy in this class. He is the one that I cannot figure out. I'm pulling up his stats. I remember watching him against UM last year. He was excellent, really dominated us. In one of those games in particular, he killed us. But looking at his stats, he goes to Clemson his freshman year, 33% from the field. When you're 6'10", obviously that is not very good. Doesn't shoot any threes. Obviously he's in the post, 33%. Goes to Virginia Tech the next year, 37.5% from the field, barely playing at all. Then he goes to next year, again, this is his third year in college, still, the field goal percentage goes up. He's shooting 58% from the line, so he's inefficient there, and he's really only playing 12 minutes a game. Now, his fourth year in college, when he's already a very old player, jumps up to 67% from the field, and this number blows my mind, 84% from the line, one of the most efficient players offensively in the entire conference. I think Coach L called him the most improved player in the conference. And then I see him in those workout videos that they played. Now he's at UM. I don't know if you've seen those on social that they posted. He looked more fluid and athletic than he looked even on the good Virginia Tech film. So I don't know who this guy is. I don't know what to expect from him. What's the ceiling? What is Lynn Kidd to you?
Wow, wait, so he only shot 37% from the field in the sophomore season?
Sophomore year, yeah. Freshman and sophomore year, he was in the 30s. And then this year, he was the most efficient player in the conference when you combine the field goal and the free throw.
His improvement is crazy because, just watching what he did last year and how technically sound he is, he doesn't come off as a guy who was, I guess, a bit raw offensively, coming into college. But with Lynn Kidd, and I don't mean this is like a negative thing. It's probably going to come off as a negative, but I don't mean it as such. He reminds me of a guy that people always like. There's certain players that I like. An example that comes to mind is like Jahlil Okafor, right? Where people watch him play and they're like, "Yo, this guy would have dominated in the '90s," right? Like he just has that sort of play style. Like Lynn Kidd, with all due respect, not a shot, kind of plays like that just because he's so skilled in the post and just getting to his hook shot, getting to his up and unders, just really good in the interior. Really good at getting to his moves. Has a lot of counters in the post as well. He's not just a drop step, pump fake, shoot or opposite shoulder hook. Like he actually has a legit bag in the post, which is something that you don't see a lot of nowadays. But also with Lynn Kidd, he not a great screener, but a good roller. He knows what to do when the ball's in his hands within 10 feet, and that doesn't include just scoring. It also means as a passer, right? So you can kind of use him a bit on short rolls and have him have him make reads then as a passer, which I think is a good skill to have as a big, especially nowadays. But yeah, I like his game a lot. And you mentioned, he's improved so much from seemingly year to year at the college level. What could he add to his game next season, right? Because we know what he is now, right? He's an electric post scorer, very good on the interior, not a really much of a rim protector or a good screener, but offensively, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get consistent interior production, right? Hey, he enters his 5th year in college. What if all of a sudden he has a 16 and 20 foot mid-range shot and he can hit it at a consistent level? That changes things with him, right? So we'll see what he does, but he definitely gives Miami a back to the basket big that they haven't had in a long time. Like I'm trying to think who was like the last. Like
Reggie Johnson, Julian Gamble.
Yeah. It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
Tanya had a little hook by the end of his career, a little hook that he turned to the basket, but I wouldn't qualify that. You know what I like about him, man, too? If he can finish with both hands around the basket, and every time he has the opportunity to finish with a two-hand slam, which is obviously the safest way to finish, like he does it. I hate when these 7-footers are around the basket and they don't finish with authority. Every time he has the opportunity to, he does.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's, I mean, not a crazy, ridiculous athlete, but definitely someone who, as you said, looks to dunk the basketball, looks to play above the rim. And that's definitely
and understands body positioning. It appears. So it's going to be exciting, man. His development has been very, very interesting. And look, he's now on his third school. You can't discount all of this experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
and he could run the floor too. I mean, that was the thing when I watched him. Again, I remember him killing Miami. I don't remember him running the floor, but then you watch the highlights and you see he's flying up and down the court when he needs to. He's old school, but he's not like Zydrunas Ilgauskas running the floor. I mean, he has some speed when it comes to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, like he's a modern old school big. I guess that's how I'll phrase that. He has the body type of someone who's mobile, as you said, he can run the floor. I really like what he's going to bring to Miami next year, and he fits that up tempo attack that they've really tried to implement the past few seasons, which I love.
Next guy we're going to get into here, Luke, which I believe is the most recent addition, and D, you and I were really excited about this one when we watched his stuff. AJ Staten-McRae, a guy who is coming over from Samford, another tournament team, really brings some nice size and versatility to the wing spot there. Another guy who can shoot the basketball and looks like he has the ability to defend as well.
Yeah, like AJ is someone that I like because he's someone I've been familiar with throughout the portal season because he was FAU's first, commit of, their portal class with their new head coach, John Jacobs. So he's someone I've tried to familiar myself with a lot. And back when when he was originally committed to FAU, I was a huge fan of what he was going to bring. Just a whole lot of veteran experience. Believe he was on the all Southern defensive team last year, third team all Southern in general. So very good defender, can guard multiple positions. He's a guard, but I mean, I really would classify him as more of a wing. Good at getting to the basket. A good bag as well as far as driving to the basket. He's really nifty when going downhill. A good shooter, not a super high volume shooter, but when he does shoot the ball, he does it pretty efficiently. I was a huge fan of his when he was at FAU, and I was disappointed when I saw he'd be committed. I was like, oh, man, like that would have been a great glue guy to have at FAU. And then I saw oh, he's actually going to Miami. Like, great. I mean, he's more likely than not going to start, but he is going to play 15 to 20 minutes per night, be a 6th through 8th man, we'll say, and play a very important role. I mean, he's going to be an exceptional glue guy, I expect. Has tournament experience. Thought he played pretty well last year against Kansas. I mean, he had that one block. I don't know if y'all remember, and then that Stanford.
Yeah, I think they called it a foul, right?
I mean, it was like the cleanest block I've ever seen, man. So yeah,
I'll pull it up now.
Yeah. I mean, like he got whatever, but no, he's a terrific player. Was surprised that Miami got a player of his caliber this late in the portal season. And I know some fans are gonna see like his transfer ranking and see, oh, he came from Stanford, he's whatever. No, he's a legit player. He's not going to put up the flashiest numbers, but he's going to play a very important role on next year's team. And he has the ability to start if need be, which is obviously very important.
The great Gene Steratore says it was a clean block. So
he is absolutely right. That I don't know what the ref was looking at there. I mean, it was. I had Stanford in my bracket too, man. I was pissed. I was like, man, that's tough. But yeah, I mean, he's a high energy guy for sure.
One guy that I also liked in the similar vein to Staten-McRae, but in that he's a bench guy, and you know he's coming in for the role, and you know what he's going to do, which I think we needed was a Kyrie Huey. Not as talented probably, but somebody who brings size, some athleticism, and a blue-collar mentality. Obviously, he's coming from Idaho State. So, he's coming into work. What do you see from him and what he could add to the depth of the front court?
Yeah, so with Kyrie, like what a get. But as you said, from Idaho State, so a cross country trip for him. But man, like he's a high energy guy, a hustler, good offensive rebounder. It kind of brings a little bit of what Lynn Kidd doesn't in some aspect, right? Blue collar player, hard nosed guy, plays below the rim. He's not as much of an above the rim finisher as Lynn Kidd is, but he is very crafty, really good with his left. I mean, he's a lefty, really good with his left hand, getting into that left-handed hook. Not anywhere near as skilled in the post as a Lynn Kidd is, but he definitely has some moves at his disposal. And yeah, I mean, he's going to play that 4-5, not really much of a shooter, pretty much just a interior guy. He's going to give you 10 minutes a night. I like him, right? He's not going to put up super gaudy numbers, but he's a veteran guy. He knows where he's supposed to be on the floor, which I feel like for bigs sometimes is something that at the college level, and especially with more inexperienced guys, they don't have that ability. Kyrie, as a senior, the fifth-year senior, I believe, he absolutely does. I like this addition. A very good front court depth piece, which Miami has not had a lot of, especially veteran ones in recent years. And I think he's going to be a good player here.
Could have used him last year. Sorry, D. Could have used him last year to eat up some of the fouls that Norchad. That's exactly he would have been. How many times this year would he have been useful when Omier got in foul trouble and they just needed someone as a stopgap for 3 to 4 minutes to get them to the next timeout, so that Omier could get back in there, right? So,
yeah.
Now, I was going to bring up Norchad because he's obviously not as good as Norchad, not as skilled, not a lot of things, but his quickness off the ground and laterally kind of reminds me of Norchad because you watch him, he's moving quick, whether it's second jump right there or just moving his feet side to side. He does have some of that Norchad stuff that, Lynn Kidd, for example, doesn't have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's definitely a bit, I guess, quicker than Lynn is. I mean, he's height-wise, I want to say he's like 6'8", 6'9", somewhere around there. So, I mean, he doesn't have quite the same height, so he makes up for that with his, with his quickness, speed, and whatnot. He's just going to bring grit. He's going to bring those same intangibles that I feel like Paul Jabet brought last year when he was used off the bench. And on that same token, like Kyrie's a bit more polished than Jabet is. So you're going to get that same tenacity, that same hustle, that same, energy glue guy coming off the bench, but you're getting someone who's a bit more skilled, who can, do a bit more when he has the ball in his hands.
Last name to go over, and you had the scoop, if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had the scoop that this was a scholarship player, which is Yusuf Basa'ama from Yale. Local guy, 6'9", 200. What can you tell us about his recruitment since you broke the story?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be your third big, fourth big off the bench. Not going to play a lot. Mostly going to be used as a practice player, someone who is going to compete with the Lynn Kids, the Kyries, during practice, and offer a bit of size and length in that regard. I mean, he played last year at Yale, started a few games, didn't really put up the craziest of numbers. But he's being brought in with the token that he's not expected to contribute much, right? Like I said, more of a practice player. Hey, right? Miami used 11 scholarship spots last year. They used all 13 this year. I'd rather Miami use them on a player who's going to be there, who could play if called upon. And Yusuf, then not use that spot at all. So, not really much to talk about there. Pretty standard energy guy, can finish near the basket, good roller, good rebounder as well. Had a very successful high school career at St. Andrews, won a state championship, I believe. So, brings that with him. Obviously a South Florida Union for him. but don't expect much from him, at Miami.
Well, look,
Now the last guy actually.
I'll point out one added benefit, Pete. If any of these guys are struggling in school, they can copy off his test. Yale grad. I think he'll be able to keep guys eligible if they're peeking over at his score. Instead of someone like Pete. So so go ahead, Pete.
No, well, we actually had one more guy to go over, a late addition to the recruiting class out of the Houston area, Divine Ugochukwu, and he's a guy who. I mean, listen, I'll pull up the highlights now, pull the tape, but as a potential combo guard, right, I don't know how much we expect him to be a contributor this season, but as it is in other sports as well, you can only rely on the portal so much. You need to continue to build quality squad depth and build from within. So is this a guy who you see as a potential, starter for Miami down the line?
I can see that. I think coming into his freshman season, I think the expectation is that he will redshirt. So not to expect much, if anything, from him this year. Still a bit raw as a guard, but some of the things that I like: good quick first step, good at the basket, very crafty, is a good 3-point shot as well. And if you look at his recruiting profile, Baylor was one of the schools that I think offered him late in the process, and really identified him in addition to Miami. So, when I look at schools that I also want to see on a player's offer sheet, when we're talking about guards, Baylor is at the top of that list because they have been so effing good in the past 5-6 years at identifying and developing really good guards. So, hey, if Baylor was on the same caliber of player, then that's a win for Miami. I mean, as I said, won't contribute much next year, but yeah, I think with some of the skills that he has, and his finishing ability. Don't know much about him as a playmaker, to be completely honest. But hey, 3-4 years down the road, if he sticks with the team, which we'll see if he does so with the portal movement and everything. But I think if he sticks in Miami, he could develop into a nice player down the road.
Yeah,
hey, it looks like he's
expected him to do anything his freshman year. I remember when Paul Jabet came in, everybody in the group chats, Pete, that we were saying, who is this guy's even worth a take? Are we doing someone a favor? And the guy ended up playing. So
he ended up giving energy off the bench for sure. And listen, Ugochukwu looks like he's got a baby face still. Maybe there's a growth spurt there as well. But because, you see the clips, the physicality he has the physicality. He plays physically. So you'd imagine grows another inch or two, gets in the weight room, develops a shot. These are a lot of things that need to happen. But just from looking at the clips, he looks like he's got something to him. So
definitely, yeah. And I think just to kind of add, I think he's a bit more ahead than a Paul Jabet was, last year as a freshman, because I didn't think Paul Jabet would. This is not a stray at him. I didn't think he'd see the floor at all last year, and I don't think that was the original plan for him to do so. But even then, he came in, brought energy. I think we all liked what he brought, given his circumstance. So I think Devon is a little bit more ahead than Jabet is in that regard. Different positions, different roles, obviously. But yeah, I think with his skill set, and as you mentioned, Pete, just if he can, develop a shot and develop a few other areas a bit more over the years, then yeah, I think he's someone that definitely could contribute in 2-3 years down the road.
Luke, I want to ask you about some style of play stuff, because really a couple things. One thing that jumps out is, when I watch the kid run the floor, I'm excited. Then I say, wait a minute, who's going to be running here? Is this going to be a shift to very much a half court? Not that we were the most up and down team around, but it seems to me that this is a half court identity when you look at what the guards can do and then what the front court guys can do.
I think with this year's roster, you have flexibility more than anything. Right. I think they will be more of a half court team than they were last year, because last year they had to run, right? Just given the lack of height that they had, given the lack of natural organic shot creators they had to run, and they had to, shoot threes within the first 7 to 8 seconds of the shot clock. They were forced to be a really fast team. Whereas this year's squad, yes, they can run, and I think they do have the personnel to do so. Players like Bethea, Pack, even someone like a Lynn Kidd, these are guys that can go out and run and that can make plays in the open floor and in transition. but you have guys who could excel in the half court, who can make baskets, running your half court sets. Jalen Blackman, for example, he's someone that can really play well in the half court. Lynn Kidd, he's a guy that, hey, there's 8 to 10 seconds left on the shot clock. We need a basket, right? Hey, Lynn, flash to the opposite block. Let's get you a quick post up, right? You have that flexibility to do that this year, whereas last year you didn't. So I think with this roster, just, thinking stylistically, you have that flexibility to be a bit of, I won't say a bit of anything, but you have the flexibility to be more than what you were last year. Like, hey, let's say you're playing a UNC and you need to play fast. Well, you can do so. Let's say you're playing a team like VTech, a team like Virginia. It's going to be a grinded out, low scoring game, right? A lot of possessions are going to last till the end of the shot clock. You now have the ability to do that as well, right? So I think just the versatility of this year's roster is probably my favorite thing about it, heading into the season.
Another thing at pace of play-wise is I'm not sure, looking at this roster, who the guy is that's going to break the defense down off the dribble and get in the paint. Sort of the driving kick presence with that first step to blow by somebody and suck everybody in. On paper, Bethea, I know he did some of that in the All-Star games, which I was impressed by. But, of course, that's an All-Star game. How much can you take? Do you see like somebody emerging there as, hey, this is the guy that's going to get the ball, he's going to get in the paint and allow a Brandon Johnson or a Blackman to get open for a three? Yeah,
like as in someone that can drive the ball in from the perimeter and create those paint touches. Yeah, so I think, like Jaleel could do. I trust Jaleel more as a rim runner in transition. Just because I do have questions about his frame and how he's able to create advantages for himself in the contact department, how he'll look, driving in half court in the half court, but that's something that we'll have to see. I think Jalen Blackman can get to the basket pretty effectively. He did that at Stetson. Yeah, it's going to be a transition to do so at Miami. The caliber of opponent is obviously going to increase. So we'll see how that transition is. I think AJ Staten McRae is a pretty good driver as well. That's probably my favorite skill of his offensively, is his ability to, organically generate rim pressure and generate paint touches. And then, of course, Nigel Pack can do so. I think Cleveland will be able to do so a bit more now that he's playing a more natural position. He's not going to be asked to play the 4 anymore. So yeah, that's something that I think there are still some questions there, and that, I could see a scenario where Miami does struggle to generate that rim pressure. But I think just comparing this year's roster to last year's roster, they have guys who, have done that before. It may not have been at the P4 level, but they have guys who have done that before. So we'll see in regards to that. And who knows, maybe Austin Swartz can effectively get to the basket. Isaiah Johnson-Aragu, at the high school level, he did so. Maybe he does so at the college level. Still some questions to be answered, but I think they have, the personnel to be a little bit more effective in that area than they, were last year, for example.
All right, Luke, D, you have any other questions?
Yeah, man, just real quick on the wrap up before you go. Mm-hmm. Now we got the team. Obviously we thought last year's team was going to be good on paper, at least this podcast did. We thought the pieces were going to add up to something that was different than the whole. But knowing how that season turned out, now looking at this year, it seems like this may be a better team when you talk about experience, depth, guys in their roles, size, the whole piece fitting together as opposed to collection of players. Do you get that sense that this is going to be a better team next year on paper based on the additions that Miami's made?
I think so. Yeah, I agree. Granted, one of the takes that I had coming into last year was that I thought Miami was going to be a better regular season team than they were when they made the Final Four. That was obviously very wrong. So we'll see nonetheless. But no, I think at the very least, Miami's going to be better. It's going to be hard to be much worse. If they're worse than they were last year, then that's wow. But I think that this year's team, they just have a lot more. They're very talented in both veteran depth, or in both as far as veterans and freshmen. I think they have 6, 7 seniors now I'm thinking about. So they have those guys who have been there before. They have guys who have been there before at the P4 level, at the mid-major level. I think it's a good cohesion of guys, and we'll see how everyone gels. But my expectation, if I were like a place like where do I think this team will go? I think I'm fairly confident they will be a tournament team. May not be like a top 4, top 5 seed, but I think this is going to be like a 6 through 9 seed in tournaments. Can win a round or two. I mean, it's so hard to project just given that we haven't seen them play yet. But I think talent-wise and just flexibility-wise, they definitely have the potential to be a tournament team. Could they be a second weekend Final Four team? I don't know. I mean, that's, we obviously want to see how the team plays first. But my expectation is that they have the talent to make the tournament easily. They have enough talent to make the tournament. We'll see what happens.
All right, Luke Chaney from 247 Sports and Inside the U. Awesome job as always. Remember to follow him at Luke Chaney 247 on Twitter. Does great work over there as well. And again, keeping us updated on all things Hurricanes basketball. Great getting your insight today, Luke. Have a good rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank y'all for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this an insight to the Canes, and you know we ain't playing no games. Joaquin said dominate, so that's what we do. Home of the legends and 7th floor crew, down in Miami where hurricanes brew. You here for the rumors, we bring you the news, cause it's all about the you. And nobody do it like CanesInSight. Nobody do it like CanesInSight. Nobody do it like CanesInSight.